Clio with Murray. That's where you can find me pretty much everywhere else. And I'm here to talk about wet and why dry isn't always best. I'm going to preface this with, this is very much my opinion. This isn't right. This is just what I think. Feel free to take it if you like it or not. So this is what dry is, approximately. I'm going to summarize this. It's originally advocated for, as far as I can find, in the Pragmatic Programmer. They apply it pretty broadly. Basically, there should be a single source of truth for everything that you have. This includes schemas, test plans, the build system, documentation, everything. You should only have one of everything. No duplication at all. Duplication leads to repeated effort, and it leads to unintended semantic drift. What you call something in one place was the same as what it was somewhere else, and then you change it, and it doesn't follow along. When I was researching this talk, I thought wet stands for everything twice and write everything twice and is sort of a joking rebuttal of dry. That's why the acronyms relate to each other. It turns out some people take wet really seriously as well and are very dogmatic about that. And say you should write everything twice and then on the third time deduplicate it, and never ever write everything 3 times, but definitely write everything at least twice, which is not really what I actually want to advocate for here. So that's not what I'm doing. This is later extraction rather than earlier, but again, in the dogmatic form, is relatively prescriptive. I'm going to talk a little bit about abstraction versus duplication, and what the benefits are for each. Again, you'll notice that the pros and cons are larger in some than others, because this is my opinion. When you get abstraction right, it saves energy and it saves effort. But when you get it wrong, the sunk cost can be really hard to overcome, and abstractions ossify over time. They become harder and harder to change the longer you have relied upon them. Pulling things apart is much harder than merging them. If you have 2 versions of a thing, making it a single thing is quite simple. If you have 1 version of a thing and you want to break it in half, that can be a much more difficult thing to do. And there is a built-in assumption that happens in almost everybody's brain when they see an abstraction, and that is that that abstraction makes sense, that it's there for a reason. That's not always true. I'm being told to update my 1Password. Apologies. This is what I get for having a managed laptop. The other way around. Duplication over abstraction. The pros here is that it is easy to switch from duplication to abstraction. Again, that's an opinion. It can be really hard in some circumstances, but I've broadly found that it is easier to go this way around. And there aren't any abstractions that you're overcoming. There's no, oh, these things all represent one truth about what kind of object they are. There are some cons, though. There is a potential for repeated effort, and you have to deal with that as long as you have those duplications. And there is the potential for missed changes on 1 or more duplicated pieces of code, and that can drift over time. It can get further and further from what was intended to be really the same thing underneath. So, what is the right abstraction? These examples come from the Clio codebase, which very few of you will be familiar with, but I'll describe them. We have a concept called webhooks, which is a thing that exists in general. They are some information gets pushed to us by an outsider to the system, and we want to potentially take some action based on it. We have a standard for controllers that check whether the webhook was sent from a valid source and is secure and all of those things, and then it stores the raw webhook that it got with a worker to be performed later. It doesn't have any opinions on what that work to be done is. It doesn't do anything other than verify that it was a valid webhook. That helps a lot with a lot of things, and in my opinion is pretty good abstraction, because take a thing in from a place and then do some work, that's the only thing we've abstracted there. The other thing that we have in the code base, we have more than 2 things, but here's another one of them, is wallet transactions. These are transactions associated with wallets. You might have an idea in your head as to what a wallet might be. It really wants me to do that, huh? I'm gonna press the secret delay for 1 hour button. It doesn't like me because I've installed a beta version of 1Password, and it wants to update me to an older version, which it can't do. So a wallet is a place that money could be referred to, but not necessarily stored, though some of them are where wallets are, where money is stored. And a wallet transaction is a representation of a transfer of value from one of those places to another one of those places, or a duplication of a transfer of money from one place to another place in a rough approximation of double entry bookkeeping and accounting, but not actually the same concept. There's very little shared logic between these things. How you transfer money in Stripe is very different to how you transfer money in non-Stripe systems. You're transferring some value doesn't have much that can be abstracted. The result is that these things are very hard to reason about, and their abstract interface is cluttered and hard to deal with. I'm not saying that the people who wrote these abstractions at the time were making a bad decision. I'm sure that at the time, these were a sensible decision to make, given the constraints involved. This is not a criticism of that. It is that now this abstraction isn't working for us. So I found an acronym that isn't, as far as I can tell, currently associated with any particular, this is how you have to do it. AHA stands for Avoid Hasty Abstractions. It is a paradigm that advocates for the right abstraction, and as is often the case with things like this, it's quite a nuanced take. There isn't really a description of what the right abstraction is, or what hasty means, or even what an abstraction is. It's very subjective. It is. But in general, I have found that anything that says, do this thing exactly n times and no more, is inaccurate or dangerous in some cases. This is not going to be something you can just follow step by step, rule by rule. It is more saying, think carefully about the abstractions that you make, and think carefully about when you have duplicated effort, and consider when you are duplicating something, is there a core here? Is there a real abstraction underneath? Is this something we should pull out? This is approximately that. These are some credits. Sandy Matz wrote a blog post on the wrong abstraction, which is really good. I found the original tweet, as far as I can tell, of where the AHA acronym came from, which is then cited in this blog post, which describes it. There we go.